our Zoom currently. We already have all the person behind the scenes, behind the stage, Professor Elmer Soriano from PUP Philippines, and then we have Professor Nurianti Mustari from Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar, and then also our moderator today, and for sure Ibu Fatmawati as the head of study program. Kak Rizal, mohon standby ya. Bapak dan Ibu, kita mulai. So, I would like to give the floor to Akmal Reza. Silahkan Pak Akmal, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, let's see. Am I clear, operator?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Clear,
Okay,
clear.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, let me introduce myself first. I'm Akmal, one of the lecturer at Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar, and today I will serve as moderator. Well, first I would like to say welcome and thank you for all participants, and especially for our honorable speakers, Professor Elmer Soriano and Professor Nurianti Mustari. Um, well, before we get into the main session, in the discussion session, let us watch the opening remark from the director of postgraduate program, Professor Dr. Irwan Akib. Please, moderator, could you play the video?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear speaker and all participants, Professor Elmer Soriano from the Polytechnic University Filipina, Professor Dr. Nurianti Mustari, MSI, University of Muhammadiyah Makassar, and moderator Akmal Reza Amri, SIP, MPhil. Thank you for your operation speaker and moderator. The topic discussed here are quite interesting. Implementation of teaching the role of youth in democratic governance. If we trace the history of the struggle for nation, we will find the role of youth in the struggle for their country's independence. Likewise, in the history of Indonesian nation, there were last three milestones in the struggle toward an independent Indonesia that were flared by young people. National awakening marked by the birth of Budi Utomo, the young flash in 1928, and the proclamation of Indonesian independence. Therefore, the role of youth in democratic governance is quite a strategy. So this time is very important to discuss. Finally, of the health of the postgraduate program of University Muhammadiyah of Makassar, I would like to express my appreciation and gratitude to the speaker and moderator, to the head of the program, and to the participant. Happy discussion. Selamat berdiskusi. Nasrul minallah wa qarib wa basyiril mu'minin. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Well, it was the opening remark from the director of postgraduate program, Bapak Professor Irwan Akib. And next, before we get into discussion, I will explain our discussion today. Our topic today is actually generally we have a democracy topic, but especially we are going to talk about the role of the youth in the democratic governance. So we have two sections. The first section we will hear the presentation from the both speaker, from Professor Elmer and from Professor Nurianti. In this second section, we have a Q&A. So all participants have opportunity to to give idea or to ask a question. Well, as introduction, yeah, in the democracy era or in the political nowadays, political system nowadays, it's inevitable to talk about the younger role because in Indonesia, for example, in the last election, we have more than 50% the voter in election it based on the younger or can see. So from the case, we can see this discussion is really important to talk about the position the younger in this political the dynamic of the political nowadays because yeah it's not as a voter but as the participation in the democracy era. Well, without further ado, Professor Elmer, yeah, the floor is yours.
Makasih, brother Akmal. Nice to see you again. Please let me have the right to share the slide that I have prepared. And then before I start, I would like to congratulate your college, your school in sustaining international activities like this, which we will be doing until maybe we have decided to break it. So, my gratitude to Ibu Director Maharida Manindar, and then Ibu Nurianti, and then Ibu Dekan Fatma, and then please extend my regards to Rector, your dear Rector in Anismo, Makassar. We hope to visit your university again soon when we have our activities for this year and then in the coming years. So it's really nice to have topics like this, the role of the youth in nation building, simply because in the past elections that we had last month, it was the youth population who have decided and who have casted the majority of the votes that was able to somehow elect the expected candidates that we had. And during the elections, every time that we have this, it is really the youth sector that is being wooed and that is being convinced by candidates. It's simply because of the recognition that the sector, the youth sector, is really the ones who are deciding or who is deciding the elections, or he who determines. Okay, wait. I am still looking for the okay, for a while, my dear friends. I am looking for the slides. Yeah, it's been a while that I used the Zoom here in the Philippines because we have a different online platform. Then share. Okay. Wait. For a while. Mhm. There it is. Uh, yes. Okay. Is it visible now? Pak Akmal?
Yeah.
Yes, bro.
Okay, so the role of the youth in nation building, I'll be talking more about the Philippine experience since this is how we have done for the past years. Okay, since we all both recognize the role of the youth. By the way, when we were there in Makassar last August, we have experienced several demonstrations coming from the students, which we also have here in the Philippines regularly. Every time that there are policies or there is a policy that is going to be implemented and eventually have a big effect on us. So that's a clear manifestation, ladies and gentlemen, that there is really a democracy in the Philippines and there is really a democracy in Indonesia. So, I will tell you what comprises the youth sector here in the Philippines. So, there is a law. This is the Republic Act number 8044 or otherwise known as the Youth in Nation Building Act, and it has officially defined the Filipino youth as those who are 15 to 30 years old. Okay, 15 to 30 years old. So, uh, I hope I still belong to the sector. But actually, I'm just joking. I'm already 47, so I will leave it to those who are from 15 to 40. So it takes a law to identify what will be comprising the youth sector. Because maybe in the future, there will be some people who will be claiming that they still belong to the youth. Okay? And maybe it's because of our previous experience that we only consider those children who are in the high school level, college as the youth. So we made it clear in the Philippine laws that it has to be someone who is from 15 to 30 years old. And besides, it has to be defined very well because we have our exclusive training ground for governance that is really being exercised by the youth sector. Then we have to identify who are going to be qualified to vote and to be voted. So that will be my discussion later on. Now, in general, this is the observation that was given by some scholars. And this is how they describe the Filipino youth. Contrary to the mainstream belief before, since the youth are known to be those who just follow, those who just obey, and those who love the elders practically. But I am not saying that we already have abandoned those good traits of respecting the elders and then respecting the laws. More than
Sorry,
those
sorry,
things that,
bro. Almost.
yes, yes.
Yeah, so sorry. I can find your slides.
Oh, okay, okay. Wait, wait.
Yes,
I'm sorry. Okay.
it's okay.
Where is the share? Yeah, do you see it now,
Got
sir?
it.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
okay. Okay. Okay. It takes a law for us to determine what comprises the youth sector, as I have said. Those who are from 15 to 30 years old, but later on I'll be discussing one governance training grounds for Filipino youth in which those Filipinos who are aged above the qualifications of those who are going to vote and to be voted will be excluded. But in as far as the term youth is concerned, we consider those 15 to 30 years old. So in the observation, this is how they describe the Filipino youth, other than the mainstream belief that I have said a while ago, that the youth are the ones who, of course, obey their parents, the elders, and then they study hard. But more than that, ladies and gentlemen, this is how the Filipino youth, which I guess also similar to the Indonesian youth sector, that this is the sector who knows their rights and are willing to fight for them. Okay? And they recognize that they are able to challenge the barriers that keep them down, that keep them from confronting or conforming to their values. So meaning to say, youth in general is already empowered. So what are the factors that makes them empowered at this point in time? Maybe they have been given extra space to move via social media. That is where they find their identity. That is where they find the safe place where they can be. And that is, they believe that is the room for them to express their thoughts, their ideas, and maybe their plans. So they have been empowered also because that is their chance to voice out, maybe to criticize, maybe to upload, okay, or give their ideas on some issues, be it local, national, or even international. So the composition of the Filipino youth is this. Okay, this is the latest data that we took or we got from the Philippine Statistics Agency. They are conducting census every 5 years, and these are the highlights. So let us disregard the gender, the call between male and then female, the color blue or pink. What really matters is, since we are talking about the Filipino youth, by trying to find out age 30, 15 to 30, meaning to say the youth sector comprises the biggest portion or biggest part of the Philippine population. And if that is the case, ladies and gentlemen, the youth sector also comprises the biggest portion of our electorates and our labor force. Okay? This is our median age in the Philippines. We're getting older. We're getting old. Okay? In 2010, our median age is 23.3 years. Then after 5 years, 1 year has been added that made us 24.3. And then another year was added in the span of another 5 years. So by projection, this year, 2025, we are 26.3 years old. So how are we going to characterize or describe those who are in or within this age, 25.3? Someone who is building his career. Someone who is a fresh graduate from college looking for a job. Physically, 25.3 years old is someone who is strong and can give too much contributions physically, and they can be a strong part of our labor force. So I don't know if we are younger or we are older, okay, compared to Indonesia, but this is the data that we got for 2024. Yeah, so it's right that we are 26, but we are one of the 15 youngest countries in terms of median age. The factors to become young are so many. Maybe the country's situation, the country's health policies, livelihood and life programs, healthcare, etc. But this is the Philippines. We are 26, and among the Southeast Asian countries, I guess the youngest is Timor-Leste, who are only 21 years old. And then even Laos, by the way. Laos and then Cambodia. So we are one of the youngest populations in terms of median age. This is the population of those who are in school, okay, by region. So 81.4% of the population aged 5 to 24 years old were enrolled and attending school in 2022. Although the ideal is it has to be 100%, but as they say, there can never be a perfect idea about sending everyone because we also need to consider factors that may affect. It can be cultural, it can be health, or simply economic reasons why they can never be or they cannot be in school at their age. So it is divided according to region. Then in terms of those who are employed, a big portion of those who are 25 to 34, 17% for 15 to 24, or if we are going to combine that, still, again, that comprises the youth sector, okay, in the Philippines. So I am showing how the youth sector contributes in the economy and in this one, how we do it politically. In our voting population, we are 75.9 million in total, and 68% of this voting population are millennials or those who belong to the Gen Z. They are registered voter. Just recently, in our elections last May, okay, and if you're going to look at the graph, look at the age, Gen Z are those who were born from 1997 to 2007. The millennials are those who were born from 1981 to 1996. Okay, if you will combine that, almost 29% for the Gen Z and slightly a little above 34% millennials, that's a big portion. That's 68%. So meaning 68% of our voters are the people who we call kabataan, the young ones. That's how we call the young ones, the youth sector, kabataan, from the root word bata. So meaning to say, candidates or politicians has to look into a proper narrative, a proper platform, a proper program for them to convince the youth sector in the Philippines. And if you're going to look at the results of the previous elections, most were dictated by the youth power. That's how we call it. The kabataan. The young ones. And even if you're going to look at the institutions in the government, we are really craving for innovations, energy, and somehow something that may be developed by the youth sector. So this is a big portion of our voting population here in the Philippines. Further, the voting age population for 2025 has reached 79.9 million. Of this number, an approximate 69.6 million are registered voters. Okay, again, the millennials from 1991 to 1996, they comprise 34.15%. Gen Z born between 1997 to 2007 follows with 28.79%, making them the second largest voting group. And then the Gen X, I guess I belong here, we represent 23.22%. Okay, and then our parents, those who were born from 1946 to 1945, and there were still who belongs to the silent generation, our grandparents, together they account for 13.83%. Now, just right after the Marcos Sr. administration, the Philippine government has decided to make some government reforms. And to make it possible, my dear friends from Onismo Makassar, we have decided to amend the Constitution. That was in 1987, and it was explicitly stated in the fundamental law of the Philippine government, of the Philippine society, that this one, the state recognizes the vital role of the youth in nation building and shall promote and protect their physical, their moral, spiritual, intellectual, and social well-being, and it shall inculcate in the youth patriotism, nationalism, and encourage their involvement in public and civic affairs. All these things are cascaded, of course, in the development of the curriculum in all levels of education, in primary education, in high school and senior high school education, until college. And even those who are taking up their master's and then doctorate degree levels. Part of the Philippine education curricula is the physical development, which can be reflected in various physical education components, especially in the primary and then secondary education. Moral, it's not necessarily about religion, but the values that we have in, based on our culture in the Philippines, diba? Including spiritual. Then our intellectual is, of course, being cascaded through the educational system that we have in the Philippines. Now, the youth patriotism and the nationalism is being reflected by encouraging the youth sector to get involved in public and civic affairs more than the demonstration that they do in cases that there are policies that may directly invite them, but more than that, the legal ways to be involved in public and civic affairs, other than the ones that we exercise last year. So this is in our 1987 Constitution. There are two aspects of empowerment, youth empowerment in the Philippines. The creation of, number one, the National Youth Commission, and then the other one that I am referring to earlier is the Sangguniang Kabataan, where the youth sector is given the right and then practice governance on their own. Because in the Philippines, we have the barangay system. For sure, there's a counterpart in Indonesia about it. Then, within the barangay, we have the Sangguniang Kabataan. What is the National Youth Commission? Sorry for the yeah, the National Youth Commission in the Philippines is mandated to promote and protect the well-being of youth by fostering their development and participation in nation building, which includes formulating policies. So, in times that there are policies that really affects the youth, the National Youth Commission is being consulted. The activity and then the proposal is being collaborated, and they are asked. So there will be some series of consultations about the effects of the policy, whether local or national. Then it has to be asked to the National Youth Commission. So there is always a consultative mechanism for the youth. These are the functions of the National Youth Commission. NYC, it's not the New York City, but the National Youth Commission is responsible for developing and reviewing national policies. So for legislators, ladies and gentlemen, it is always proper for them to check if these policies concerning the youth sector will really work for them. So they have to be consulted. Now you will be asking me, what comprises the National Youth Commission? Someone who is appointed by the executive department. And it is composed of commissioners. That's how we call them. So other than policy formulation review, they can also implement programs. They plan, yes, they implement, and they oversee a national integrated youth promotion and development program. So that's how the youth is empowered in the Philippines. Other than program implementation, there are consultative mechanisms because the NYC establishes a platform for dialogue between the youth and then the involving representatives from various youth organizations and institutions. The next one is youth development policies or initiatives. It aims to promote the physical, moral, spiritual, intellectual, and social well-being of the youth and enabling them to realize their full potential. So the youth sector is not just being used during elections, but there are concrete policies and programs by the national government to empower or to foster youth development. For nationalism and values, it strives to instill patriotism and other desirable values in the youth such as faith, respect for life, family unity, and adherence to truth and justice. Youth participation, they encourage youth involvement in character building activities and in shaping policies and programs that affects everyone's lives. Then, the other one that I am referring, the NYC or the National Youth Commission is an agency created to empower the youth sector. Now, we will go to something that is more participative in the sense that compared to the National Youth Commission, whose members are all appointed by the national government, the Sangguniang Kabataan is a different thing. Because leaders of the Sangguniang Kabataan or SK are elected by the youth sector who are not until 30 years old, but this is only an activity exclusively for 15 up to 18 years old. So it says that this is a community council that represents the youth in the barangay in the Philippines. Barangay is the smallest political unit in the Philippines. They were put on hold but not abolished prior to 2013 barangay elections because of some issues that they face. Because in implementing policy, ladies and gentlemen, it is not as easy as what we want. It is not as perfect as we desire. But we cannot avoid that there are several challenges that we have to face. But these challenges will be serving as somehow a room for everyone's improvement. So when they were they were put on hold in 2013, an SK Reform Act was signed which made several changes. Later on, I will tell you what are the issues. Okay, this is a cut and paste from our local government code of 1991. That is the basic law about the local government units in the Philippines. In every barangay, it says there will be or there must be a sangguniang kabataan to be composed of chairman, and 7 members. The council. Okay? They can appoint secretaries and treasurer. How are they chosen? They are elected. The Philippines is conducting SK elections every 3 years also. And the voters are those who are from ages 15 to 18 only. So 19 years old up to 30 are not already included in the Sangguniang Kabataan. Yeah. Then, this is how they call it, Katipunan ng Kabataan. The entire youth sector, of a barangay is called Katipunan, or the total group of the youth sector. Okay? Okay, they conduct meetings also every 3 months, just like a council. And what is their usual agenda during meetings? It's all about youth programs and development. Now you'll be asking me, do they have funds for the Sangguniang Kabataan? Yes. Yes. Just like the other local government unit officials, the Sangguniang Kabataan has an exclusive fund to be disbursed by the officials. So one possible challenge that you will be seeing in that scenario is it prone to controversies, at some point corruption? Yes. Although the Sangguniang Kabataan was established with ideal results, like teaching the youth sector to practice good governance, to get rid of the old practices that was done previously by the old regimes. So that's how ideal it is. What are the powers and functions of the Sangguniang Kabataan? They promulgate resolutions, so meaning they have legislative powers also. They can make SK ordinances. But it has to be based on the Local Government Code of the Philippines in 1991. They can initiate programs like the Executive Department, which is designed to enhance the different areas, be it social, political, economic, cultural, intellectual, moral, spiritual, and physical development of the members. So practically, all the sports initiatives of barangays, all the sports initiatives of cities and municipalities are initiated by the Sangguniang Kabataan. They hold fundraising activities, the proceeds of which shall be tax exempted. So they can raise funds, and then the money that they can raise through their efforts needs not to pay taxes and shall accrue to the general fund of SK or Sangguniang Kabataan, provided however that in the appropriation the specific purpose for which such has been held shall be first satisfied. Yeah, they create bodies also or committees as it may deem necessary to effectively carry out its programs and activities. So meaning, in layman's term, we call the Sangguniang Kabataan as the junior government, still administered or still supervised by the senior government because they are still young also. Okay, then there is also an element of accountability on the part of the officials because they need to submit annual and end of term reports to the mother unit known as the barangay on their projects and activities for the survival and development of the youth in barangay. And since the Sangguniang Kabataan is not an independent republic, they also coordinate and consult with all youth organizations in the barangay because in the barangay level, then eventually there will be a federation of all the barangays in a municipality or a city until the provinces up to the national level. They also coordinate with national agencies for the implementation of youth development projects and programs at the national level. So these are all very ideal practices which can be learned by the young ones once they are elected by the fellow youth sector. And then they exercise such other powers and perform such other duties and functions as the SB may determine or delegate. A portion of the budget of the barangay goes to the Sangguniang Kabataan other than those that they can solicit. They can solicit. But again, if there are money involved, there must be an accountability or a person who may be accountable for that purpose. Okay, the qualifications of the Sangguniang Kabataan, yeah, it's 15 to 21. I'm sorry for saying it's 18. 15 to 21 on the day of the election. There is also a qualification that he or she must be able to read and write Filipino, English, or the local dialect or the local language that they have. And this is how ideal it is, must not have been convicted for any crime. Okay? How many years will they serve as Sangguniang Kabataan? It's 3 years. It's 3 years. Oh, wait. The head of the Sangguniang Kabataan is the chairman, registered voters of the Kabataan. So, 15 to 21 years old will have a separate registration from the national government, chairman or member. Then, yeah, the Sangguniang Kabataan, they will also serve as an ex officio. The chairman is already part of the Sangguniang Bayan or Sangguniang, the higher level legislative body of an LGU. These are the powers of the Sangguniang Kabataan chairman who is acting like the president of the youth. He presides on all meetings, or he or she presides on the meetings. They implement policies and programs and projects within his jurisdiction in coordination with the parent LGU and exercise supervision over the affairs and activities of the Sangguniang Kabataan and the official conduct of its members. And with the concurrence of the SK, they appoint from among others the Sangguniang Kabataan, the treasurer, and then secretary, meaning they also have appointing powers. Okay? And they exercise powers and perform other duties and functions as may be prescribed by the ordinance. Will they stop from their schooling once they are elected Sangguniang Kabataan Chairman? No. Being an SK official is only a part-time job of the SK chairman. There is a provision that he or she can never be pulled on full-time basis to work as chairman. So, when it was created in the 1990s, they have developed a pure reputation because, yeah, one youth advocate said he was dissuaded from running SK because aside from the lack of concrete legislative, that's a problem if you will let the youth have it on their own. There are lack of concrete legislative and youth development programs. Other than that, some SKs or kabataans have been involved in small-time corrupt activities, nepotism, and other programs. The programs is only limited to creating sports festivals, even pageantry, sad to say. But that was before. We already have a complete change or complete reforms in our Sangguniang Kabataan. Other than the claim that SKs are breeding ground for political dynasty. Yes, because the ones running in the Sangguniang Kabataan are the children of the known politicians recognizing the number that they can get when they decide to run. So this is the reform. This is the reform. The Republic Act 10742. So from 15 to 17, it became 18 to 24. Okay. And then there are strong provisions about anti-political dynasty, restrictions, and anything that is against the principle of the Constitution. Okay, then the local development, youth development council was created also to support the SK programs composed of representatives from different youth organizations. So other than the SK, there are youth organizations present in every municipality, in every city that actively participates in the affairs of the Sangguniang Kabataan. So, ladies and gentlemen, my friends from Monismo Makassar, that's how we recognize the role of the youth in nation building in the Philippines, not just a literal or recognition, especially during the times of election, but we have appropriate agencies created for them to exercise full potentials of governance, good governance, and etc. And an effective training ground for them to realize that governance is not just an effort of the officials and efforts of the government. We have to realize, ladies and gentlemen, that governance is a collaborative effort by the government and by the citizens. Without the participation of these two sectors, I can say it's nothing and it's one-sided. So, Terima kasih, ladies and gentlemen, and then thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the role of the youth in nation building here in the Philippines. And I'll be waiting for the Q&A. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Elmer. Well, through the Professor Elmer presentation, we can see the big picture of the youth population today, especially in Philippines. It's more than 60%, if I'm not wrong, Prof. Yes, the population consists of more than 60% based on the young generation. Actually, it's same here in Indonesia, Professor. We have a 55% in the last election. the younger. So it's a dominates the election is dominated by the young generation. It's almost 55%. And next, the big point is the big population of the young generation. It's mean the young generation lead a lot of sector in our life. It's not only the politic, but also the social and the economic sector as well. There's an interesting thing here in the Philippines based on the Mr. Professor Elmer presentation. We know the National Youth Commission, one of the specific department who take a responsibility for the young developments. And yeah, the Sangguniang Kabataan is like a community council that represents youth in barangay. It's important to say that barangay is the smallest governmental unit in the Philippines. Indonesia, we call it kecamatan atau kelurahan. Nah, that's and one of the function of the Sangguniang Kabataan is interesting because one of the big function for Sangguniang Kabataan is to make sure the agenda of the anti-political dynasty, right? Yeah, so yeah, Philippines and Indonesia, it's if you want to see the political dynamic of political, the political dynasty is one of the big problem in our country. Well, thank you very much, Professor Elmer. We will back to you in the Q&A section. And then we move to the second speaker, Professor Dr. Nuryanti Mustari. Professor Dr. Nuryanti Mustari, the microphone is yours.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks the moderator. We will start our presentation. Okay. Is it clear? Visible?
Yes, Professor, it's visible.
Yes,
Okay.
is it clear, Professor?
Yeah, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Honorable Professor Irwan Akib, MPD, as the Director of Postgraduate Program, Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar. The Honorable Dr. Fatmawati, MSc, as the Head of Master Public Administration, Postgraduate Program, Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar. The Honorable Prof. Elmer Soriano, as the Dean, College of Political Science and Public Administration, Polytechnic University of Philippines. The Honorable Richard from Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar and Polytechnic University of Philippines. Thanks for joining. And all of the participants from Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar and Polytechnic University Philippines. Thanks for joining this seminar. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity that has given to me. The theme of this seminar is about the role of youth in democratic governance. I want to invite us to see that democracy is not just about election and practical politics, but also about how the government is present to fulfill the basic rights of the people, such as the rights of the children to grow up healthy and intelligent. This is where the issues of stunting becomes important. Through this presentation, I want to show that a lot of scientific research on stunting has been done, but not much has been used in real time in policy. Today, youth are not only political agents, but also knowledge agents who are able to bridge between science and public policy. So, for today, I will start our presentation about the materials, which is under the title Scientific Footprint and Policy Gaps, mapping the discourse on stunting through a bibliometric analysis. So, the output this presentation is how to understanding the research policy nexus on stunting issues through bibliometric analysis. So this season, I will explain to you about some point as the background on stunting in Indonesia. But before that, I will explain to you about stunting. As we know, stunting is chronic nutritional problem that has a serious impact on children's physical, cognitive, and future productivity development. According to World Health Organization, around 149 million children under 5 years old experienced stunting in 2020, with the highest prevalence in low and middle income countries. You can see from the slide there are 3 points as the background on stunting in Indonesia. The first one is about a multidimensional impact. This is point discuss about stunting affect children's future health, cognition, and economic potential. The second point discuss about government effort focus on significantly reducing stunting rates. And the last point is research policy gap. This point discuss about the persistent disconnect between research finding and policy implementation. Okay, we can move to the next slide. This slide discuss about the challenges in integrating research with policy. You can see from the slide, there are 3 different pictures on the slide. For the first picture, discuss about lack of cross-sectoral coordination. In this case, research has not yet been integrated into public health policy. Next, we are going to the second picture. This picture explains about the limited role of knowledge brokers. This is about the limited role of mediators between researchers and policymakers. And the last picture about the data and research fragmentation. This part discuss about fragmented data as barrier to evidence-based policymaking. Well, the next slide. The role of evidence-based policy in combating stunting, there are 2 points that crucial for this part. The first one about database and research, which is policies must be responsive to robust evidence and emerging trends. And the next point about bibliometric analysis. This point discuss about mapping research themes and gaps to improve policy. Okay, next slide. The role of bibliometric analysis in policy. For the rule, there are 3 parts that I'm going to explain to you. The first one is identification of research trends. Bibliometric analysis reveals research trends on stunting and provide insight for more targeted policy development. The second one is the data-driven policy evaluation. providing data to evaluate policy effectiveness and enable program adjustment based on community needs. The third one is collaboration between researchers and institutions. In this part, mapping researchers and institutional collaboration to foster synergy in effective stunting intervention. Okay, here I wanna show you the mapping Scopus database using the Porphyr application. We can see from the picture, there are some color here. The question, what is the meaning from each color? I will explain to you about the colors. The green cluster highlight the importance of public policy and reducing stunting rates. It shows that stunting cannot be addressed without appropriate and effective policies. The red cluster illustrates the strong linkage between policy, maternal health, and nutrition. Keywords such as policy, mother, and nutrition are interconnected, indicating that addressing stunting requires an approach that integrates this aspect. The yellow cluster contains keywords such as Indonesia, child nutrition, and determinant. This shows that many studies have been conducted in Indonesia, and the main focus is on finding factors that causes stunting, such as maternal education level, access to health service, and family economic condition. The blue cluster emphasizes the importance of supporting mothers, including education on exclusive breastfeeding and access to health service. Maternal behavior in the early stage of a child life greatly determine the risk of stunting. Next, talking about findings of bibliometric analysis, the dominance of nutrition and clinical themes, most research focus on biological aspect of stunting. Then limited public administration, only 2% of the work focus and policy and governance. And the last, cluster visualization, unveiling underexplored research areas. Okay, you can see the diagram from this slide. This slide discusses about the field of study. Based on the diagram, the result of the research related to policy, public administration, and governance, only 2%, while the research themes related to health science are very high. Gaps in current research and policy. The first one, limited focus on governance, the lack of comprehensive policy research, stunting program management. The second one, in non-reflective policy. In non-reflective policy, the implementation of policy is not fully based on the latest scientific evidence. This is the graph about the trends in scientific publication 2015 till 2024 on stunting policy. Next. The trends and mapping of stunting research. Publication from 2019 to 2022. A sub-search in maternal nutrition and health research. Next, decline of 2023, the decline in publication output signal opportunity for research enhancement. And then about minority issues, social, policy and development remain marginalized areas. And the last, as the summary, the opportunity and policy recommendation for addressing stunting. There are 3 points as the summary. The first one, multidisciplinary research. This is about integrating social, economic, and health aspect in research. Second one, leveraging big data and the pentahelix model, optimizing collaboration among government, academia, community, and the private sector. And the last, strengthening evidence-based community task force. This point about the data-driven implementation for effective and sustainable outcomes. Suggestion. If we want a healthy democracy, then the youth must care not only about the votes at the polling station, but also about the voice of data and evidence. And through issues like stunting, we learn that big change start from small things as long as they are supported by knowledge, collaborative work, and young people enthusiasm. Okay, I think that's all for my presentation today. Thank you so much for your kind attention. And finally, I just want to say, and I will back to the moderator. Please, time is yours. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Yeah, Professor Norianti began her presentation with the scope of democracy. Yeah, I agree. The democracy is not talk about the election, but also we included a lot of aspect in our life. One of that is the health. That's why Professor Nurianti saw us how the trend of the research nowadays that so only 2% the issue of the stunting uh, is taught in the public administrations. So it's yes, one of the smallest study field that talk about stunting. And the second was, then the second, yep, stunting in Indonesia is one of the uh, it's kind of big problem because till the day we have more than 4 million cases stunting in Indonesia. And yeah, I agree that developing the young generation is not talk about the political aspect or so on, but also the biological fact and the health condition of the young generation. Well, thank you very much, Professor. We are now moved to the second section, that is the Q&A section. Now, I believe some of the participants have questions. So please, to all participants, if you have a question, raise your hand and open your microphone after I please to you. Okay. Actually, we have two questions, Prof. Elmer, from the chat room. The first one from the Sudirman. He said, Professor Elmer, the NYC focuses on developing not only intellectual but also moral, spiritual, and social aspect of youth. In your experience, how can we balance the different dimensions in the education system to help young people reach their full potential?
Okay, thank you very much for the question,
Okay.
Sudirman, and then Pak Akmal. The National Youth Commission has all these mandates or the things that has to be done. But as I have said earlier, all the policies involving the youth, all the programs, project, everything about them has to be consulted with the youth per se, especially by the National Youth Commission and the local youth organizations affected all over the country. Now, it really sounds so ideal that the question is all about how can we balance these different dimensions. Not all programs and policies have moral, spiritual, and other social aspects. Each program and then policy has a focus, which is somehow the policymakers and then the implementers has to develop or has to stay with it. So in the educational system in the Philippines, Sudirman, there are several components of the curricula. Like when you say intellectual, of course, the things that they need to focus, if it is in science and technology, engineering, mathematics, or maybe they want to focus on accountancy, business management, and if they want to focus on social sciences like in political science, sociology, psychology, economics, political economy, or maybe they wish to focus on public administration and then development studies. Now, when it comes to spiritual, there are spiritually related courses that they have in the curriculum, especially in the elementary and then high school level. Particularly, spiritual is all about values education, which was ever since inculcated in our curriculum, ever since. And then there are Catholic schools here that has exclusive courses about the Catholic principles that they wish to propagate or they love. Okay? And the other one, the social aspects of the youth. We have courses like civic welfare services. Then we have the social studies services in which children in the elementary and then high school level or even in the college are sent to different communities and have some sort of immersion to let them feel or let them know how does it feel to be in that situation. In which case, you are teaching the students not just knowledge that is limited in the books or in the computers, but more importantly, it's the experience that you will get. Then eventually, if you have knowledge, if you have experience, then we will call it wisdom already. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Elmer. And then actually we have a three question. One yeah from the Suderman and the second one from City Furkan. Actually, all of question is uh, 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 wondering about the Philippines, right? That's why I think it's a question for you, Mr. Elmer. Yeah, this second question is Professor Elmer. What initiative has the Philippine government implemented to encourage youth participation in election and foster a sense of nationalism among the youth?
Yeah, the youth has been totally empowered with the use of social media, ladies and gentlemen. Because without this social media, like here in the Philippines, the most popular is Facebook. Then they have the X, which is formerly known as Twitter. Then they have the Instagram. I guess this is not just about the youth sector that really affects the encouragement of participation in the elections. Before, we only rely on TV stations, in which case you will only be waiting for the time slot allotted for the news item to appear. If it is 5 in the afternoon or 6 in the afternoon, then be it. Then you will wait for another day to know things. about what's happening in the Philippines. But with the advent of social media accounts, you can learn anything on time, real time. Just like if there is something that will happen or something that's happening in the community, in the country, some people will not hesitate to take pictures, take videos, and write something. I guess that's one thing that has been developed for sure, not just in the Philippines. The youth sector and the entire voting population of the Philippines became so vigilant and became aware of the activities being done by the politicians. So if we are going to look at the results of the previous elections, that's a very good development because the information is already in the internet, activities are already posted on real time, then by that, politicians are going to be challenged. Politicians has to make some innovations and be more careful on the things that they will do and things that they will say just to satisfy or get the sympathy of the youth votes. So government, the implemented initiatives, there are so many. There are so many. If you are 18 years old, you can already register. Being 18 years old is not an automatic license for you to vote. You need to register first. If you register but you did not vote, again, that will not count, you know. So we have all the means to encourage youth participation in the elections, and then by that, nationalism and patriotism can be developed by your involvement itself. Thank you. I hope that satisfies the question of Siti Fitriani Saleh.
Okay, thank you. The last question, Professor, yeah, is still regarding NYC. Yeah, we are wondering because in Indonesia itself we have the department who take responsibility for the youth, but it's under the ministry. We call the Ministry of the Youth and the Sport. So it's specifically to develop the young skill in the sport and the arts. So that's why we are wondering about the NYC. Yeah, the question is, excuse me, Prof. The Philippines has the National Youth Commission to support youth development and nation building. In your view, how effective has this commission been in connecting education with youth participation in public affairs? Could you share a simple success story or challenge you've seen in this area?
The youth sector, yeah, thank you, Pak Akmal. The youth sector is always being consulted in formulating particularly the curriculum and then the programs. Previously, we have added 2 school years because formerly we don't have senior high school in the Philippines. We have elementary, then you go direct to high school. After that, you can go to college. But we have added 2 more layers. That's a senior high school. After a while, there is a unified sentiment, not just from the youth sector, ladies and gentlemen, that there must be some reforms and changes that can be practically applied because since this is a continuous consultation, this is a continuous evaluation of programs and policies, it's good to know that when you have time and when you have an effort to change it and further develop, it only shows that it is a success story because you are successful in identifying the weaknesses and then the strengths of the policy itself. And a big portion of that consultation And a big portion of that evaluation is being consulted directly to the affected sector. And that is the youth. That's the value. It's good to be part of the youth sector. But you can never be forever a youth because we are aging. But one more success story is, again, you obtain knowledge, you have enough experience. The best success story that we can do is when you already deliver wisdom to the young ones also for them to learn that. Thank you, Fatima.
Okay, Prof, thank you very much. Actually, it's an interesting discussion. However, we restrict the question just for 3 questions nowadays. Before we close this discussion, we have Dr. Fatmawati as the head of the postgraduate department, especially MEP, Master of Administration Public, to give the closing remark. So, Bu Fatmawati, uh, time is yours.
Okay, thank you,
Bu Fatmawati.
Dr. Akmal.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, especially for Miss Prof. Elmar. Nice to see you again, Prof.
Thank you, Ibu Dekan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Once again, welcome to Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar, and thank you all for being here today, especially for postgraduate program Unis Makassar, for especially again program Magister Ilmu Administrasi Publik. Prof. Elmar, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your value insights. Your session was truly inspiring and gave us a fresh way to think about how youth can contribute to democratic governance. I'm sure our students learn a lot more from your experience in Philippines. To Prof. Nuryanti, thank you as well for your rich and meaningful presentation. You help us see how research can really guide better policies, especially on key issues like stunting. Finally, we also want to thank all participants, students, lecturers, and guests for your active presence and enthusiasm throughout the season. And of course, our appreciation goes to LBPKUI, Miss Maharida. Thank you for hosting and supporting this international guest lecture. Thank you for making this event possible. By the way, for Prof. Elmar, any plan to come back to Makassar soon?
Yes, hopefully we can be there before the end of this year for implementation.
I'm waiting for you.
Yeah, and we will be willing to do it, Ibu Fatma and Ibu Nuryanti, Pak Akmal, Ibu Maharida, and then the rest of the the officials and staff of Unismo Makassar. By the way, our other college will be going there also, the English department. I guess this is going to be on July. And then that's the result of telling good things about Unismo Makassar. They became interested also.
Yeah. Nice sound, Prof. Thank you, everyone. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah, back to moderator.
Thank you very much, Bu Fatma. And that was our discussion today. Thank you very much for all participants, and especially here we have the fourth Vice Rector, Bapak Dr. Burhanuddin. Thank you very much for attending person. And then thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, bro.
Hello, Vice Rector. How are you?
Thank you very much.
And thank you for the Professor Elmer. Say hello to all your team, Ibu Stefani and friends. And thank you all, the speaker, the second speaker, Prof. Nuryanti, and the special one, Mem Maharida. Thank you very much for your support. And before we go, please open your camera and we have to take a picture before we leave this room. Please open your camera.
Yeah.
Have a picture. Okay.
Ibu Fatma, open please your camera.
3. Oke, 1, 2, 3. Gimana Pak Rizal? Sudah?
Oke, di capture Rizal.
Ya sudah Bapak.
Oke, good. Lanjut slide berikutnya. Oke, terima kasih.
Oke, terima kasih semua.
Oke,
Terima
thank you.
kasih Pak Dekan. Terima
Terima
kasih.
kasih.
Alhamdulillah.
See you next time.
See you next time.
See you next time, Prof.
Ya, Prof.
Yeah, how are you all?